attempt to douse the fire. We can attempt to avoid confrontation. There are certain times when this is the best course, without doubt. One is when the issues are complex and difficult to explain in 20 seconds on television, which I realize can mean most everything today, but I think you know what I'm talking about. If you've got a complex issue, if you're dealing with a tax structure, for example, don't bother making a confrontation over it if you can possibly avoid it. Your chances of coming across are very slim. If the opposition is unbeatable, clearly avoid confrontation. If the opposing group needs a conflict to bolster its own ego or to keep going or to raise funds, avoid a conflict. The second course is to let the conflict burn itself out. That is to say, let the opposition make the decision. Stand ready with all your issue anticipation work done and let them decide whether they're really going to make a confrontational issue from it. This makes good sense when you hold a strong, striking position. Another time to let the issue burn itself out is when the opposition group is weak and underfunded and you're not really sure they have the capability of making an issue. Clearly you don't want to make their issue for them. That, by the way, is a key point which I'm going to touch on later. The third course is to fan the flames, to seek confrontation. And there certainly are times to do this. When you have a vital point to make, but maybe you've had trouble getting the public to pay attention. At this time, confrontation or criticism gives you a platform to make the point that you've been anxious to get across to your publics. You may also want to attract attention to subjects which are corollary from the issue. And again, you may seek confrontation because it gives you that opportunity. Finally, very often, confrontations are caused by groups which really are stretching the facts, are stretching the issue, and sometimes taking them up on their confrontation is a way to reveal their great self-interest or the thinness of their argument. Let me summarize some of the points that I've been making, or at least implying. The first is that in all of the issue realm, while there are a number of strategies available, notice that the actual facts involved in the issue have not been mentioned, at least by me so far. The reason for that is that when you're talking about issues, you're not talking about the facts. This is not the court of law. Putting out the information, that solid information that everyone always talks about that's just going to blow the issue away, just doesn't happen in our world, certainly not in the American court of public opinion. We're dealing here with human beings. We're dealing with people's perceptions, with people's feelings. Facts do not erase perceptions and feelings. Certainly everybody in our practice knows that. The second point is, I mentioned earlier the advice that mediation is the solution to issue problems. But where do you carry on this mediation? I think there's no substitute for face-to-face, person-to-person work, not only with the opposition with whom you are negotiating around the issue, but also with your own publics and with the stakeholder publics. I think sometimes we've gotten so enamored of our marvelous technologies and of our ability to mass produce and disseminate messages that we forget that we are dealing with public relations, with relationships, and that those are brought about by individuals meeting together, looking at one another, discussing openly what's happening in their feelings around the issue. In fact, some people don't use the phrase issues anticipation as I do. They call it issue management. I don't use that phrase because we know that we can't manage a public issue. Clearly, however, we can manage our response to that issue. I do have another phrase that I want to share with you that does use the word management, however, and that is perception management. It seems to me that when we're dealing with issues, what we're really dealing with is the perceptions, not the facts again, but the perceptions of the individuals who are involved in the issue or who will be affected by it. What is a perception? A perception is the sum of our feelings, thinking around any subject. It's the way that our minds draw a bottom line on our attitude, our response to any particular subject. It takes into account the information that we've gotten, our intellectual processing of that information, our emotional feelings, our intuition, what our peers think and what the social forces are, and it puts all of those together, and with computer-type split-second timing, we have a perception about a person or a place or an issue. Now, dealing with perceptions clearly demonstrates again why facts are not the way to deal with issues. But I think it also suggests some methods for handling issue campaigns when they arise. One of the first rules in dealing with a campaign that we are trying to manage the perceptions of is going to be the question of response. If we are attacked, how do we respond? Rather than responding directly, which gives the perception to everyone involved that there is a confrontation here, there is an issue here, how about blanketing the issues? Rather than always feeling we have to respond to every criticism, how about adopting a policy of not responding whenever we can possibly avoid it, but instead of doing something, some overt action, or possibly it's the issuing of a policy or a statement, that simply proves that the attack, the criticism is untrue. Let me give you an example. If someone were to say about your organization that you were, for example, not meeting equal opportunity quotas, that you were not hiring enough minority groups or enough women, rather than responding, after all, what could you say? You could say it's not true, and here are the numbers, and we do have a lot of minority employees, all of which is really not very believable. It's just words. How about adopting a policy of publicizing, of getting out in front of the public those members of minority groups who do in fact work for you, so that if your speakers bureau is active in the time immediately after the criticism, most of the speakers during that period could be people who are members of those groups. You then have blanketed the issue. You have never dignified the existence or any possible truth in the criticism. Instead, you've put it to rest by a blanketing technique. Another technique, which is possible, is the simple slogan technique. So often, issues are involved in slogans. And whether we like it or not, the public responds to slogans. They certainly seem to respond to those slogans that are aimed at us. I wonder how capable we are of coming up with slogans, with themes, mottos, that deal with the issues from our side. If you take a look at many of the issues that are being debated in this country, it seems often the organization that has the superior way of phrasing the issue, which I'm calling a slogan, is the one that in fact sets the tone and the rules of the debate, and therefore begins to take charge of the issue. A third course is to make sure that your actions in the direction of whatever the criticism is are in fact actions that are positive, that prove that the criticism is not warranted. This is different than simple blanketing, which is to emphasize the alternative to what you're being criticized for, to show the other side. But taking a look at our entire realm of actions gives us an opportunity to be sure, A, that we're above criticism, and B, to let those actions, when they reach our customers, our employees, our neighbors, our government representatives, to make sure that those actions by themselves on a daily operational basis disprove the criticism. Surprisingly, it doesn't take very long for positive actions to wipe out unwarranted criticisms. Always, however, whichever course we choose, there is an overriding guideline, and that is to keep our internal audiences, our employees, our members, our shareholders informed of what we're doing. Because we cannot lose sight of the fact that while we as professionals, working with our management colleagues, are attempting to deal with the issue, to manage the perceptions as best we can, and to make them positive, there are many, many other people who, in the minds of the public and of our various special publics, represent that organization. clearly, if they're saying something different than we are, if they don't know what the strategy is, if they don't have the facts, they are going to be working against us even though they mean not to, because they will be putting out messages which contradict ours. Some folks who've spent a lot of time working on issues gave us a list not long ago of some specific guidelines. Let me share them with you. The first is to stick to the issues at hand. Don't bring in irrelevant issues. Don't bring in any other issues. Secondly, are we able to admit we might be wrong? It's a hard thing to do, and yet the ability of this simple action to win the support of people for our position by showing our humanity is all-powerful. How about our position? Are we able to alter it, or are we afraid to alter our position? We should not be afraid to alter our position, say these experts, because if the situation changes, if the facts force you into a certain position, don't be slavishly sticking to a former one which will only make you look foolish. How about finding good things to say about the other side? Are we really able to do that? We're dealing now in an emotional arena. We're involved in situations where feelings run deep, and there's nothing like bringing back the call of democratic discussion of the court of public opinion. And in order to do that, to restore some rationality to the issue debate, we have to be able to admit that the people on the other side are good people, that they're serious, that they feel they're making a strong case, and that in the best American tradition, this is a disagreement over a topic, and that's all it is. The best way to show that we are good citizens and that we deserve that same description is to be able to say good things about our opposition. Presenting our views in a way that does not invite a chip to be knocked from our shoulder is another rule. So often, when an organization is attacked, it feels hurt, and its executives especially wonder, how could the public say these things about me? And so the response comes out as very defensive, almost as if we had a chip on our shoulder. If we can avoid that, we'll be much more effective, according to the folks who put together this list. Never ridicule is another rule. Ridicule is a great temptation. Oh, it's so wonderful to just find those words that seem to absolutely zap the opposition. The problem is that the public that's looking on to the debate will undoubtedly feel the tenor of those words and probably will put your opposition into an underdog position. That's the kind of sympathy, of course, that you don't want to give them. Finally, is it possible to rise above the opposition, to ignore the details of the complaints, and to phrase the issue in a way that involves the entire public interest, and to show how you and your organization have that as your primary goal? You really are working on the overall public interest rather than the specifics of the debate. There are a number of other things that might be said on the topic of issues. Certainly it's one of the major topics in our field today. But I just want to close by touching briefly on the traditional public relations role of publicity and public awareness, and how I believe it's often misunderstood when it's used in the arena of issues. It may be great to get the word out about your organization's product or about its services as often as you can in a marketing mode for publicity, for product awareness. But I think we have to question seriously getting the word out too often on issues. A number of studies that have recently been done right here in New Hampshire, which have national and international implications, ought to be pretty good guidelines for us. One of those studies indicates that when a hot issue is being debated by the public over a period of time, that the more the media covers that issue, the more the public mind tends to swing towards the opponents, towards the attackers, towards those who are urging some kind of caution or some kind of change in the structure. A study done